on the Block Party. I'm your host, Joyce Conroy. We're always excited about Ernie's Corner with award-winning creative director and designer Ernie Cefalu. And Ernie, a little bird told me that you have another trip coming around the sun.
Yes, I do. I do. Coming up next week, 79 times around the sun. Unbelievable. And how quick it goes. It's amazing as we do these Ernie's Corners and as I become part of the family on the block here, I start really reminiscing. I was always the guy that lived in the present and what was in the future. I never really looked back. I never looked back. I mean, it was like we were doing these things and it was great at the moment and it was a high at the moment, but here's the next thing and here's the next thing and here's the next thing. And so when the internet came along, all of a sudden I started seeing that people that I didn't even know, younger than me or my age or older, we're talking about the stuff that we did, like we talked about in last week's show, we did 50 years ago. This stuff was done over 50 years ago. And it's just amazing that it's so relevant today. And it's because of you and the family here on the block and the block party and the Ernie's Corner. It's going to live forever. Like we talked about, it's going to always be here as long as people have eyes and ears. What we're doing today, what we've done in the past, what we're going to be doing in the future. A lot of great stuff coming in the future with what we're going to be talking about. And today's one of those kind of funny ones in the sense that, again, if I would have never come out to Los Angeles, I would have never been able to do anything for Capricorn, which would have been this Cowboy album, along with Wet Willie and Captain Beyond, and meeting Phil Walden, and just that whole Capricorn. I liken it to Little David Records. There were small companies that really saw the value in what we would bring, the difference between what we had to offer, not only from a concept standpoint, but from an execution standpoint. Our comps, our sketches look better than a lot of people's finished art. It's because these artists that were there with me at Pacific on here, they were artists. They were about, I mean, we couldn't say, hey, we could have said, hey, you know what? Do that sketch, take that idea and make it really simple. Just do a rough, something that I would do, like a rough sketch, and I'll sell it, or Tony will sell it. We'll talk him through it. But it never really worked. It never really sounded right coming out of my mouth. It never really resonated with these artists. Joe Garnett, I can't mention their names enough. Bill Garland, Drew Struzan, Ingrid Hankey. It goes Carl Ramsey. These amazing illustrators that I was so blessed to be able to be around. For me, it's about finding the right combination to make what I was able to bring even better. I was very limited. There's a lot of people out there that are a lot better than I am. And I'm in envy. We talked about the Leon Russell Carney album. That logo is probably the most beautiful logo I've ever seen in my life. I wish I would have done it, but I'm glad I didn't, because it probably wouldn't have looked like that. And I wouldn't have learned anything from looking at that and going, oh my God, this is really, not only is it, Leon Russell, but it's a beautiful design. And I think in a way, all these things that we've done, all these covers that we talk about, are like that. I look at each one of them, and the internet is made me take the blinders off of what's in front of me and look at what's around me and what's behind me. And I'm sure you can say the same thing about your career in music, right?
Very true. Yes. And this is where the internet is a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so much great information available that you can, you can just find, and this is great what we're doing, because I'm looking at this group Cowboy, and I'm learning about all these groups that put out great stuff, but we didn't
Right.
know about them, like Sarah and
Yeah.
$5 shoes.
Yeah, yeah, and the Haley brothers, and there's a
Hmm.
bunch of them, and Cowboy was one of those. It was really kind of a way that we met them was really weird, because, like I said, if I would have never come to Los Angeles, I would have never, been on that floor that was right around the corner from Capricorn Records. And because we were in the music business to get, and on the same floor, just a few doors away, and Lee Dorman was really the one that was the in-between guy that was really a fan of Pacific Pioneer right from the start. And, signing to Capricorn Records, this Southern country label, and they're like a heavy metal band. It was like Kenny Rankin on Little David Records. There's a lot of similarities to these little companies that had acts like that wanted the differentiation and didn't want it to get, the thing about Phil Walden was he didn't want he was high on, on Captain Beyond. He was definitely completely dedicated to the Allman Brothers and Wet Willie and, and Dickie Betts. And I was able to work with a few of those. We did a Wet Willie album that we had talked about, and we did this Cowboy album, and we did Captain Beyond album. And Phil was just really a great person. And he wanted each of the acts on his label to be different, even though Cowboy was a smooth Southern, sound, not unlike Wet Willie, not unlike, the Allman Brothers, kind of favoring more toward, sort of like the Byrds. I think of like the Byrds and a couple other groups like that from that time. Um, Phil wanted to expand country music. Capricorn Records was really a leader in bringing Southern rock to the forefront. Just like the other genres of like punk and grunge and with Bob Marley and whole reggae thing, there were these companies that really sort of pushed it to the forefront. And Phil Walden's Capricorn Records was truly that. And when we got this assignment, this was really great. This was a 1973 release, but it was a compilation of two earlier albums that they had done. One was called Reach for the Sky, and I think Five Will Get You 10 were the two albums that they did. And they did a similar thing with the Allman Brothers. They took early albums, put them together in a double record set. And so this was like Phil's way of keeping them separate, but pushing everything toward the forefront, along with the Wet Willie and the other stuff that we were doing. And Dickie Betts, working with Dickie Betts was great. He was very involved with the American Indian thing, and we did a logo for him. And I wish I would have been able to do something for the Allman Brothers. I always liked them. They were them and the Doobie Brothers. Those guys are just amazing. Toulouse Street was one of the coolest. The lettering on Toulouse Street was really something, and just them on the couch, and the House of Ill Repute, and just that whole country scene. And Phil would talk a lot about that. He would talk about, he used to manage. Well, he used to manage Otis Redding, and he used to manage Sam and Dave and Al Green and Percy Sledge. He told some great stories about him and Otis Redding because
Oh, wow.
yeah, he was, touring, and Otis he could perform in white venues, but he couldn't, like if it was a hotel or whatever, they had a separate section in those towns for black people. And, I remember as a kid in the fifth grade, I went to Kentucky. My mother's family came from Italy and went to Vico and Hazard and London. And my grandfather was very entrepreneurial with drive-in theaters and supermarkets and stuff. But she, when I went back there in the fifth grade with her, and I remember seeing, signs that said white people only on drinking fountains in bathrooms. And then I remember there was a time that we went through the black section of Vico, actually, Hazard, I think it was. But it was so weird because we didn't have anything like that in San Jose, California. I mean, there was no signs or dream. I mean, we were all kind of the same out here, I mean, and so it was very odd to see that. But Phil told some amazing stories about him and Otis and the stuff that they went through, and some of these other black acts that he managed, and then. I remember the other band that this music Cowboy reminded me is the Flying Burrito Brothers.
Oh, they are great. Yeah.
Aren't they? I
Graham
know.
Parsons.
Yes, exactly. What a great band. But if the Byrds and Flying Burrito Brothers and Cowboy, their music is really kind of neat and similar. And to what you were saying about music that was great, but never really got the attention that it really needed to get. I even know a lot of these a lot of albums around that time. You'd have to listen. You bought the album for the single. It maybe had another one or two cuts, but the more you listened to the album, the more you got into the music. And I don't think that there was enough time. There was a lot of releases going on, a lot of music coming out there, and everybody jumped on it. It was like when the hippie movement started and all the music started to come from San Francisco. A lot of these, acts would come from all over the country, Black Oak and some of these other ones that we had talked about to get record deals. This is where the record deals were happening. And sort of Phil was going against that being in, Georgia and stuff, or in Alabama, but really realized the importance of having a Los Angeles office to break a lot of his acts. And then along came Muscle Shoals, became a big recording facility for a lot of the Southern bands. We had done work for the Marshall Tucker Band, and it's just really great stuff. And this cover is really unique. So we get this. The name of the album is "Why Quit When You're Losing." And and so I wanted to do something that was dynamic, really had some punch to it. So I did this cowboy lettering, and it's got the band underneath. And I created this little logo of a cowboy, an old-time cowboy on a bucking bronco. And for the front cover, this is a Joe Garnett illustration. And two of my favorite, growing up in the 50s, there was westerns everywhere. Johnny McBrown was my big hero, even before Roy Rogers and Bob Steele and some of those other guys. And I was too young for Tom Holt and those early cowboy guys that, I didn't really have that much. Even Gene Autry was way before me. And then along came Johnny McBrown. So two of my favorites were Johnny McBrown and Gary Cooper. So I told Joe, let's do something with Johnny McBrown and Gary Cooper. So he did this painting. It's beautiful. I mean, and the fact that they were kind of competing in real life was a great way because I didn't say, make them look like they're fighting. I just said, let's use Johnny McBrown and Gary Cooper in a composition. And so this is what he came back with. Joe was very much like that. Same thing with the Doors album, Full Circle. I didn't give him a whole lot of direction other than what I was thinking for the zoetrope and the evolution of an embryo to an embryo and all the stages in between. He came back with that incredible painting. Joe was like that. In a lot of ways, he was like Drew and Bill. I mean, again, these guys were so talented, and they would rise to any occasion, anything that I needed them to do, especially Bill Garland. He was really unique and learned how to be a fine artist from Drew, and Drew learned how to be a cartoonist from him. So when we get to the back cover of this, if you look really close, it's a dead man's hand, right? But if you look really close in this background illustration, that's me and Drew. And we used to do a lot of that. We had a Polaroid camera and we take all kinds of pictures of each other. The greatest hits, that logo where it says Alice Cooper's greatest hits and the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, that's all us, taking different positions, and then the Drew put those into a composition. This is the same thing. This is Drew over here, and he's pointing the gun at me. I had the hat on, and I'm sitting down, and so it was really cool. Drew did this background illustration or this back cover illustration. That was all him.
That
And
is
I'm
neat. Now, Ernie, there's some lettering there that it said
Yeah,
that back cover. What does that mean? It looks like rope.
it is. And you know what? Thank you for reminding me of that, because later on, when we did Muscle of Love, I wanted to do some lettering in that logo that looked like rope. And I had done this earlier. And it's on, you can see it here. Let's see the back cover. It goes all the way around them. And then we've got the music notes and stuff going on behind that. But yeah, I wanted it to have that kind of, dead man's hand. You take them out and hang them. So it just seemed to be the right thing to do at that time. And then, we have all the credits here on the back cover. And then the inside, we had all these lyrics, okay, but it was a gatefold album. So I was able to create this I took my little cowboy illustration on the bucking bronco and I put it on the end. So when the album opened up, the gatefold had that, and I'll put it here like this. You can see it better that way.
That is really nice. Now, again, it captures a very nostalgic feel because Westerns are very nostalgic for a lot
Yeah.
of people. Now, their music was more like a country folk.
Yeah, country folk with swing and jazz. It was more
Whoa.
jazzy, and that's why if they would have been able to get the exposure that they would have, and we've said this before about a lot of the stuff that we've talked about that most people don't even know who Cowboy was
No.
today. So, and that's again, that's the beauty of what you bring to this is you give, it's more than me just talking about the artwork. Oh, look at how this pretty illustration, or isn't this clever? It's you put in, you connect the dots, you fill in the blanks. I mean, it's so great. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you add. And I learn, you're teaching me. You really, I'm sort of giving you exposure to things that you may not know of, but you're teaching me on every one of these that we've done. I've learned something. And I think that if I can learn it, our neighbors here on the block are also learning it. And we see that. We talked about this earlier. We see that in the responses that we're getting, the number of views that we're getting, or what do you call it, clicks or whatever. We're getting more than ever before. People are seeing and understanding and learning. I mean, it's more about it. For me, it's getting it out there, and to find someone like you is like it's like Martin and Lewis. It's like Abbott and Costello. It's like these famous teams. It's that have made such a memorable you know dedication to what we're trying to do. And again, you put the two together. If it were just me talking about these covers, it would be nowhere as interesting. And I'm sure we'd have lost sponsorship, not sponsorship, we'd have lost viewership for sure, because I think they enjoy, and I see that in the comments, that we get, and I get a ton of them. It's just incredible how I'm watching that grow. And you're such a huge part of that.
There, everybody is so kind, and you are too, because each week we're learning as well. And you look at this Cowboy album. Was there any like as far as musicians, anyone that we would know about that was part of the band
Well, I
that
mean,
went on to another project?
yeah, Scott Boyer and Tommy Toppin were writers and musicians, and both of them have passed away now. And Tommy, I think, just recently, or was it Scott? But those two guys went on to record with other bands. I think it was Tommy that played with the Allman Brothers, and they were, but their main thing was this Cowboy, and they did quite a few, really great songs. And again, it's so competitive. Being a
Yeah.
musician has got to be so frustrating. It's like being an artist. You get so much rejection, and and everybody is good. And then you go online and you see a 8-year-old kid playing Stairway to Heaven on a guitar. It sounds, better than Led Zeppelin. And you go, my God, this is incredible. And record companies are really being hurt by that too, which deserves them. So, gives they had their way and took away from a lot of artists and made a lot of money that they shouldn't have, and now they're paying the price. It's kind of like that, you always get what you deserve, and some people look around and go, well, that guy, just so rich and famous and has everything and he never had to pay a due in his life. But that's not true. There's always, there's always something in the closet, if people don't know about it, that dues that you pay. Nobody gets out without paying dues. And I haven't been a perfect person in my life, but I try to do good as I see it and I feel it. And I know when people are sincere. I've been able to learn that over the years, and that's really important because um, it's all we have. We have each other, and we have people that are really meaningful in our lives, and then there are so many that aren't. And being able to distinguish, and I think you see that a lot in you see that a lot in music where, bands hate each other. I mean, they were so great when they were together, and you wonder why, and is it egos? Is it just being greed? Is it one or more of the seven deadly sins that sit in, and envy, and, just all the rest of it goes along with, how we are, what we're made up of. And that's why I, enjoy working with you so much, because you're just really a breath of fresh air. You really are. And the block party is for me too you know.
And
So
Ernie, you as well. Well, I'm just speechless. Just thank you so much. It
no, you're the bomb. You really
Oh,
are.
it's
I mean,
always a joy talking to you, and we always managed to unearth so many
yeah,
things. And I
yeah.
know future. I'm looking forward to all the discussions. The cutting room floor, even your
Oh,
cutting room floor is
that's
very
coming up.
interesting.
That's
Oh
coming up
yeah,
next month. Snow White and the
yes.
Seven Dwarfs.
Now that's going to be a great
Oh
discussion.
yeah. Oh yeah. And it's got a great story to it, and how years later I ended up doing a lot of work for Disney because of that. And it didn't make it. But they did years later pick up on the logo and used it on other stuff. But the actual concept of the package sort of, it was the next generation of Sesame Street. And it was appealing to that same age group. And they had seen that cover. And they really, well, I was called in because of that, because of the Sesame Street package. It's so, wonderful, Joyce. What you bring also is the ability for me to remember all these things and how they kind of one led to the other. Even though there was 189 album covers that we did at Pacific Pioneer and thousands of corporate pieces, the stories are all there. And what you enable me to do is remember them, because there's so many. I mean, and people say all the time, well, how do you remember all that stuff? Well, first of all, I lived it. Second of
Yeah.
all, thank God for Joyce, who is able to give me a moment, give me a place to think about it. And that's what, for me, the biggest thing, that having a little spot here on the block, having a corner, gives me the ability to just kick back and think about all the stuff from the past. 54 years, 54 years of work. And it's so refreshing for me too to remember this stuff. And then when I see the cover, I remember, oh yeah, Johnny McBrown and Gary Cooper and Joe Garnett, and how it worked with Bill taking the picture of the back cover, and me and Drew being in the same composition. I mean, and I without talking about this, I probably would have not thought about it for a long time, because again, it was always what's in front of me, not looking back at what we had done, other than to not do it again. And that used to happen quite a few times. I'd come up with an idea, and we'd have the meeting in the art department about it, and they go, "Oh man, that's just like this, or that kind of reminds me of this, and we need to be more different." So it wasn't just me being, "Oh, let's be different on everything we do." A lot of times, and that was part of my education, was a lot of times I was forced to, even though I thought it was a great idea, and then when I was reminded that it was kind of like what we did over here, and it was something that we did in corporate that was now in music, and my rationale would be, well, that was in corporate, and they'd go, no, that's not what it's about. It's about us learning, about us growing, becoming better artists, better at what we did. And when you look at it, it really worked, Joyce, because it wasn't just me. All these other people that I've talked about went on to do bigger and better things. And this was the start of it. Cowboy was one of the stakes in the ground in 1973. We just started in 72. Drew didn't even come along till the mid 72, and Joe was already there. And then Bill came along in 73. I mean, and Carl Ramsey was a freelancer, and Joe Garnett was a friend, and then joined the group, left their companies and joined Pacific Pioneer. We were in the right spot at the right time. And, timing is everything. Timing is everything. You could be so great and never be able to have that moment, waiting for it, and then being aware of what you're doing. I mean, that, because sometimes the opportunities come and go by. There's that old adage, opportunity never knocks twice. And that's really true. And my career, I've been very blessed to be able to, not every time, but I've got a good batting average. Nobody bats 1,000, but I've got a pretty good batting average with not only music, but with the corporate world as well, and how they influenced each other, how they helped us stay afloat. You
And that
know,
is a beautiful early project, because when you
yeah.
mentioned the year, did you get any feedback from anyone in the group? And what did Phil Walden say?
Oh, Phil loved us.
I'm
Phil,
sure. I'm
he was
sure.
he was like Shep Gordon. He was a huge fan of what we were doing, and really, like I said, he shared stuff with us, and we were part of the family. We'd go over there after work, and everybody'd party, and Lee'd be there, and Rhino, and some of
Oh
these other
gosh.
Dickie Betts would be there, and we'd be just sitting around drinking beer, smoke a little pot, and talking about what we were going to be doing, what we had done. Phil was a huge fan. I mean, he was very much aware of Craig Braun moving in right down the hall, but he was even more aware of the Rolling Stones tongue and the early stuff that we had done at Pacific Eye and Ear. And we talked a lot about that. I mean, he was being approached by Craig. He was being approached by Wilkes Braun. He was being approached by some of these other, Kitty Hawk Graphics. Gary, forget his first name was Gary. Can't remember his last name, but he had Kitty Hawk Graphics, and it was, Jimmy Wattell and some of these other groups that were just starting to be more like Pacific Eye and Ear. We were very unique. There was us, and there was what do you call it? Hypnosis in England, but in the United States there were very few. There was Pushpin Studios. They did a couple albums, but they were more corporate world, and had dabbled. And then after us, years later came Rod Dyer and a few of these other companies that became synonymous with doing album covers. And as they were going up, the industry was going down. And we were lucky enough because by that time in mid 80s, we had made that transition because we couldn't do an album cover for $250. We just couldn't do it. But there were plenty of designers coming out of Art Center and artists that were coming to Los Angeles that would do a cover for $250 because you wanted to do an album cover. I mean, the least we ever did an album cover for was $1,500, and the most we ever got was, I think, maybe $4,000 or $5,000, and that was an elaborate package that we had done for Alice. And I mean, I think it was $1 billion babies, but everybody else was in between, somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 to do an album cover. That's why corporate America was so important to us, because the time that we would spend on a $2,500 project, we would take that same amount of time and put it into a project for Nestle or something and be able to bill $7,000 or $8,000. So it was just inevitable to keep afloat. We needed that corporate piece. And we were one of the only ones. Even Hypnosis wasn't doing corporate work. They were just doing album covers. And a lot of the other companies that I talked about, they were only doing album covers. We were always doing corporate work because it always sort of augmented the rest of. That's how we could let Drew or Bill spend hours doing a sketch. You saw those Black Sabbath sketches. That, it could have very easily been stick figures and me saying, now this is a guy that's at the split second of his death and he's a good guy and this is a bad. But no, we wanted to make sure that they got it. And it only got better. When they saw the finished piece, it only got better. And that was a way of exceeding. To me, people say, oh, we're going to exceed your expectations. They exceed your expectations. Well, and most of them fall flat, because the best way to do that is to under promise and over deliver. And that was kind of our mantra. We under promised, but the promise that was under promised was spot on, but we over delivered on the finish. So they're used to, and I can't tell you how many times they're used to looking at this, and all of a sudden they see the finished piece, and it was like, it's like some of these custom car companies where they get a hunk of junk and the guy wants it to be beautiful. And then after a year or whatever, it's this beautiful vehicle, and their jaws drop when they see it. I've experienced that myself with my cars. I mean, I have a truck. That 40 Ford pickup was 17 and a half years building that truck from a frame. That's what we
That is,
started with.
love that truck.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that truck.
Yeah.
Ernie, as far as a mind meld, I'm still discovering all about Cowboy. This is thanks to you. And I believe their music may be available. So
Yeah,
this is
I think
something
so.
I'm going to delve into.
Okay, well, for me, the two songs that really stick out in my mind are All My Friends and Five Will Get You 10. Those two songs really kind of reflect the sound, them, their mentality, their ability to make it swing and jazz, but it's still country. They were so unique and never really, and that's got to be so frustrating, to be so good and not, and then when you get a break and it doesn't happen, it's like, and all I can do is compare it to, and I'm sure you can too, where you really put your heart into this thing and you're just so proud of it. And people go, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. And you just want to grab them by the neck, and
I know it
smash
does
them around.
happen. It
Yeah,
does happen.
right.
That's where you sometimes, have to, do it for, the satisfaction that you bring yourself in a non-egotistical way, but just knowing that, you made a contribution. And I think the sad part is when it comes to Cowboy and a lot of these groups with radio, it was very narrow casted.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if it was a rock and roll station, and if something had like swing or jazz that
what
was part
area?
of it. You get somebody vetoing it and saying, "No, we can't play that."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I'm happy to be a part of public radio,
Mm.
because we look beyond that. We don't pigeonhole an artist. So
Yeah.
this is
Well, it's
wonderful
like
that Cowboy is.
education. It's what's going on today in our world. They're trying to limit what you learn and dictate to you what you learn. And there's a whole big world out there. And it's more than just this. And I wouldn't want to be young today going through the school system and stuff. It's just so different. And I don't want to sound like an old poo-poo, but there are basic things that you need to know that are just pushed to one side and you're dictated to. And it's just I can only believe, and I'm a firm believer in hope, and I think that it's going to get better. It's about to get better, and when it gets better, it's going to be amazing. It's like having a tooth that is just abscessing and just killing you, keeping you up. You can't sleep, and once it's pulled, everything just sort of gets better. Of course, the drugs help too, but
That's for
but
sure.
yeah,
Drugs and hope, and I'm with you
thank
there,
God for
Ernie.
drugs. Thank God for drugs.